I want to paint you a picture, a very specific picture, and I want you to tell me quietly, just to yourself, if any part of it sounds familiar. Here's the picture. It's the end of the day. You're tired. You've been giving to everyone and everything since the moment you woke up. And at some point in the evening, maybe it's 9 p.m., maybe it's later, something happens. A craving hits, or you eat something you didn't plan to, or you skip the workout you told yourself you were going to, or you step on the scale and the number is not what you hoped for. And then it starts. The voice. You know the one that says, I knew you couldn't do this. You have no willpower. You've ruined it again. Why'd you even bother? You're always going to be like this. You'll never change. You don't deserve to feel good. That voice, which is brutal, relentless, personal, the kind of language that if you said it to anyone else in your life, to a friend, to a daughter, to anyone you love, would be considered genuinely cruel. But we say it to ourselves so often. Many of us say it to ourselves every single day, multiple times a day. And somewhere along the way, we convinced ourselves that this voice, this cruel, punishing, relentless inner critic, was our fuel, our motivation, the thing keeping us in the game. Today, I want to tell you something. That voice is not your fuel. That voice is your cage. And today's episode is about learning to recognize it for what it is and finding something infinitely more powerful to replace it with. Welcome. Let's go. Now, before we get into it, I want to personally welcome you to my podcast. I'm Vera Brown, weight loss, health, and fitness coach for women 40 and above who want to lose weight and transform their health naturally and sustainably. After struggling with my weight and health for decades in the corporate world and as an entrepreneur, I lost more than 100 pounds in my mid-40s and have kept it off. No pills, no injections, no procedures, no extremes, no tracking. In my podcast, I share what worked for me, including actionable strategies. I discuss fitness, nutrition, sleep, stress, and mindset to help you achieve your weight loss and health transformation goals. Join me. Now, let's get into it. Today's episode is one I've been wanting to record for a long time because it is deeply personal. Because it is the conversation I wish someone had with me 20 years ago. And because I think it might be one of the most important things I say on this podcast. Today, we are going there. We are saying the things that so few of us say, and we are going raw and vulnerable. We are talking about self-punishment, self-hatred, the cruel inner monologue that so many of us mistake for motivation, and the radical, evidence-backed, life-changing idea that self-acceptance, not self-punishment, is the actual foundation of a lasting health transformation. Before we go any further, everything is in the show notes below. My free motivation meditation, my free nutrition guide, my one-to-one coaching details, the wait list to be the first to know when I launch my first cravings tool. Go and grab those after the episode. Now, let's get into it. I want to start by asking you to do something. And I want you to actually do it, not just listen and move on. Think about the last time you had a setback on your health journey. A missed workout, a meal that went off plan, a craving that won, a week when nothing went the way you intended. And think about what you said to yourself in that moment. The actual words, the tone, the verdict. Now, and this is the important bit. Imagine saying those exact words to your best friend, or your daughter, or your sister. Imagine she came to you upset because she had missed a workout, or given into a craving, or had a hard week. and you looked her in the eyes and you said what you said to yourself. Would you? Would you actually say those things? Of course not, because to say those things to someone you love would be cruel. It would be unkind. It would be a form of verbal abuse. And yet, we say those things to ourselves without hesitation every day, multiple times a day, across years and decades. And we do not even register it as cruelty because it has become so normal, so automatic, so deeply woven into the internal landscape that we barely hear it anymore. And the thing is, the research in the field of self compassion, and I do want to bring in some of the science into it today because I think it gives this conversation the weight it deserves. That research shows that women in particular tend to speak to themselves with a level of harshness that bears no relationship to the reality of the situation. Does that resonate with you? I know it certainly resonated with me when I came across that research. It suggests that women, on average, tend to report higher levels of self criticism than men. Let's be honest, no surprise there. And crucially, some studies show that this inner harshness does not produce better results. It actually produces worse ones. Let me say that again so it really lands. Research suggests that chronic self criticism can undermine your motivation, your resilience, and your long term behavior change. It shows that treating yourself harshly does not actually make you more likely to succeed. It makes you less likely to. And we're going to come back to that because I think it's one of the most important things I'll say today, because it certainly completely changed my mind on how I talk to myself and what I truly use to motivate myself, not only in health, but in life. Because let me tell you where I was for a very long time. And I want to tell you honestly here, not the neat version, not the edited, curated version, the real one. For decades, literally more than 2 decades, I operated from the mindset of more pain, more gain. You know the quotes, the ones that look motivational on a bumper sticker. Pain is weakness leaving the body. Embrace the suck. No excuses. The only bad workout is the one that didn't happen. And I believed them deeply. I lived by them. I apply them not to only my workouts, but to the way I spoke to myself about my body, my choices, my health, my results. I generally thought if I was not suffering enough, I wasn't doing it right. And if I wasn't in pain, I wasn't trying hard enough. And I would go even further. I thought if I wasn't hating what I saw in the mirror, and hating what I was doing and hating the whole experience, then I was being weak and I wasn't pushing myself hard enough and I was letting myself off too easily. And the thing is, with those tough style motivation quotes, they do sound tough. They sound like the mindset of somebody who gets things done. They sound, on the surface, like the language of high achievement. But at the heart of the matter, they are not productive, at least not for me. And I would bet if you're listening to this and nodding along, not for you either. And the thing is, that was a hard won lesson. It took me decades to figure this out. Because here is what that approach actually looked like in practice for me. Maybe this is what it looks like for you. It looked like years of yo yo dieting, fad diets, meal replacement shakes, hardcore fitness classes that I hated, restrictive calorie tracking. And each time, I could do it for a few weeks, a few months sometimes, but eventually the punishment became too much. The self hatred became too heavy. The mental and emotional exhaustion became unbearable, and I'd collapse, give up, regain the weight, and then months or years later, start the whole cycle all over again. Be honest, does that pattern sound familiar? Because I know I'm not the only one who has lived it. And the thing is, the most devastating part of that whole experience was not the weight. The most devastating part of what that cycle did to me was the belief in myself. Every time I started and collapsed, my brain filed another piece of evidence, another data point in the story that I was somebody who could not do this, someone who always failed with her weight loss goals, somebody who tried to lose weight and just never quite got there. And that story accumulated over 2 decades, and it became the wall that I was pushing against. Not the diet, the story. Now, I want to go somewhere that I think is genuinely important, and it is the part of the conversation that I've never heard anyone in the health and wellness space properly address. I want to take a moment and talk about why we do it to ourselves, why we punish ourselves, so many of us capable, courageous, incredible women, when it comes to our health and our weight. Why do we punish ourselves, myself included? And I want to talk about it because I think one of the many reasons is because it felt safe. I know that sounds contradictory. How could punishing yourself, how could hating yourself feel safe? It's ridiculous when you say it, but it did. For me, maybe for you. It did for years. And I think many of us, many of you listening, some version of this will resonate. Because here's the thing, many behaviors, even painful or counterproductive ones, often serve some psychological function. We do not do things without a reason, even when we cannot articulate the reason. Even when the reason makes no logical sense to the outside world, something is being served. And for me, and I think for many women who've struggled with their health for a long time, punishing myself served something very specific. It served as proof of effort. Let me explain what I mean because this took me years to understand about myself. The thing is, when you've tried to lose weight many times, like I have, and struggled many times, there is a particular kind of pain that builds up. And it's not just the frustration of not reaching the goal, although that is real. It's the fear of trying again and failing again. The fear of being vulnerable again. The fear of hoping and being disappointed again. And the self punishment, that cruel self talk, the extreme restriction, the harsh exercise regimes that felt more like penance than movement, those all gave me something that felt safer than hope for years. They gave me suffering as proof of effort. I genuinely thought if I hated myself enough, if I pushed hard enough, if I was in enough pain, well then, even if I failed, at least I could say I tried. At least there would be a note on the report card. She made the effort, she suffered, she cared. And here's the twisted logic underneath that. The part that I'm almost embarrassed to admit, but I think it's incredibly important and incredibly common. If I allowed myself to love myself and then failed anyway, that would mean that the love for myself was not enough. That would mean that I was not enough. That would mean that something far more painful than the failure itself was present. But if I punished myself and still failed, well, at least I had the punishment as an excuse. At least the cruelty was proof I cared. At least I had tried in the hardest possible way. Does any of this resonate with you? Because the thing is that I now believe that that way of thinking that I spent decades thinking, that was a sort of protection mechanism dressed up as motivation, masquerading as discipline. But fundamentally, it was a way of never having to be truly vulnerable, never having to truly hope, never having to risk loving yourself and failing. Anyway, does any of this resonate? I want to stay here for a moment because I think it is genuinely important. If you've ever found yourself being cruel to yourself as a form of motivation, if the harsh voice feels somehow safer than the kind one, I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken, but instead you've developed a coping mechanism that made complete sense given your history and your experience, just like it made sense to me. And it made sense because it protected you from something that felt even more frightening than the punishment. The problem, though, is that this can also make lasting change much harder. Because change, real, lasting, sustainable change, that requires the very thing that self punishment was protecting you from: hope, vulnerability, the belief that you are worth the effort. Now, I want to talk about what the inner critic actually does over time, because I think most of us understand that it feels bad. No surprises there. But I don't think most of us fully appreciate the mechanical process by which it actively undermines the results we're trying to create. Think about it this way: every time you punish yourself, every time the inner critic lands a blow, you are doing something very specific. You are building a story, a narrative about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve. A story might sound like this: I have no willpower. I will always fail. I never finish what I start. I am someone who cannot maintain their health. I am someone who is always going to struggle with their weight. I am someone who does not deserve to feel good in my body. Now, here is what the research shows about stories like these. The mind is extraordinarily efficient at finding evidence that confirms what it already believes. What does that mean? Well, it means that once you hold a belief about yourself, whatever that belief is, once that story is established, your brain tends to notice and prioritize evidence that supports that story, that supports that belief. And your brain tends to deprioritize and to notice less the data that contradicts that story. So the story becomes a sort of self fulfilling prophecy. You tell yourself you always fail, and then your brain works unconsciously, automatically, to find the evidence that proves you right. The moments you gave in, the workouts you missed, the weight you regained, all of it, your brain files a proof of the story. And the moments where you did well, the weeks of consistency, the healthy choices, the genuine progress, those moments tend to get filtered out. Those moments carry less emotional weight because they do not fit the existing story, because the story is not actually really just about your health. The story is about your worth. And that is a much heavier, much more difficult thing to change. There is that quote. You might have heard it. It gets shared online quite a bit. The beatings will continue until morale improves. Well, the joke being, of course, that morale cannot improve because the beatings are what's destroying the morale. And the irony is so obvious when you say it out loud, and yet so many of us, myself included, have lived by that philosophy for years. We genuinely believed that the punishment would eventually produce the improvement, when the evidence of our own lives was telling us over and over that it was doing the opposite. But we just didn't quite know how to see that truth. Okay, I want to talk about something specific now because I think it is one of the most universal and most painful experiences on any health journey. And it's the experience that generates more shame, more self punishment, and more cruel inner dialogue than almost anything else. I want to take a moment to talk about cravings because if there is one thing I hear about consistently from the women I coach, from the messages I receive online, from the conversations I have in this community, it is the shame around cravings. The feeling that having a craving is a sign of weakness. The that giving in to a craving is evidence of failure. That the craving itself is proof that something is wrong with you. That you lack the discipline or the character to be the kind of person who loses weight and keeps it off. And I want to say this as clearly and directly as I possibly can. Cravings are not a character flaw. Cravings are not a sign of weakness. Cravings are not evidence that you are someone who cannot do this. Instead, what they are, cravings are a signal, a biological signal from your body trying to communicate something. And the craving itself is not the problem. The craving is the messenger. And punishing yourself for having the messenger does not solve the underlying message. It just adds a layer of shame onto something that was already uncomfortable. And let me explain what I mean here because this is genuinely important. There are, based on everything I've learned and everything I share in my dedicated cravings episode, which is linked in the show notes, and I do encourage you to listen after this one. There are essentially, I believe, four main sources of cravings, and not one of them is weak character. The first source of cravings is what I call the rebellion craving. This is the craving that comes directly from following other people's rigid rules. When you're on a restrictive diet, when food is divided into allowed and forbidden, when you're being told that what you can and cannot have, your brain's natural response to that restriction is to want precisely what you are not allowed. Not because you're undisciplined, because you are a human, because humans are psychologically wired to resist having their freedom constrained. The second source of cravings is dehydration. I know it sounds too simple, I know. But stay with me because mild dehydration produces symptoms that overlap significantly with hunger and craving signals. Things like fatigue, low energy, a vague sense that you need something, and many of us by mid afternoon or evening are running in a state of mild dehydration that we haven't even registered at all. Now, the third most common source of craving is blood sugar. And this is the one that I think is most important for the conversation about shame that we're having here today. Because when you eat refined carbohydrates or sugary foods, your blood sugar spikes and then crashes. And when it crashes, your brain sends an urgent signal for fast energy. Sugar, carbohydrates, anything that will raise the blood glucose quickly. And that craving can feel particularly overwhelming. It can feel like an emergency. And in a way, it sort of is. It's your physiology in a mild crisis state. But it has nothing to do with willpower or character. It's just your body responding to a blood sugar crash that was created hours earlier by what you ate or drank. And that's the thing, you are not failing in that moment of experiencing that craving. Instead, you're experiencing a physiological consequence. And the fourth source of cravings that cause so much shame, and perhaps the most common one, is the emotional cravings. The cravings that hit not because you are truly hungry, but because you are stressed, or lonely, or overwhelmed, or exhausted, or bored. And that craving, that is really a call for comfort, for soothing, for a moment of relief from whatever the day has been. And let me say this about emotional cravings. Research shows that the relationship between stress and emotional eating is one of the most consistently documented findings in nutrition psychology. Stress activates cortisol. Cortisol specifically drives you toward high calorie, high sugar foods. This is not a weakness. This is biology. This is your body's stress response looking for fast energy to deal with a perceived threat. And yet, when you give in to an emotional craving, you know what happens. You've experienced it. I've experienced it too. The inner critic descends with extraordinary speed and cruelty. The inner critic, that voice says, you shouldn't have done that. You have no control. You ruined everything. What's wrong with you? So please hear me when I say this with love. Nothing is wrong with you. You had a craving. You responded to it in a way that your biology was primed to respond to it. And the thing that will genuinely help, the thing that changes the pattern over time, is not more punishment. It's more understanding, more tools, more compassion. Now, if cravings are something you genuinely struggle with, and I know for many of us that it absolutely is, I have a full dedicated episode that goes deep on all four of these cravings and gives you real practical strategies for each one. The link is in the show notes below. Go and listen to it after this episode because understanding your cravings, really understanding them, not just fighting them, is genuinely one of the most powerful things you can do for your health journey. And here's something I'm particularly excited to tell you. I'm currently building something specifically designed to help women manage cravings in real time. Not just understand them conceptually, but have an actual tool they can reach for in the moment when the craving is overwhelming and the shame spiral is about to begin. It is something I'm genuinely proud of and that I believe will be genuinely useful. If that sounds like something you want, if cravings are a real challenge for you on your health journey, I want you to join the waitlist. The link is in the show notes. It takes less than 30 seconds, and you'll be amongst the first to know when it launches. I'd love for you to have it. Now, I want to keep going with this conversation about the inner critic and why self punishment is actually not the right motivation strategy. And I want to specifically talk about self sabotage because next to cravings, self sabotaging behavior is the thing that generates the most shame in the women I work with. And it is the thing that is the most consistently misunderstood. It's certainly the thing that most of us struggle with one way or another in our weight loss and health transformation journey. When we self sabotage, when we do the thing that works against our own goals, when we undermine our own progress, oh man, the inner critic has a field day. You've experienced it. I've experienced it too. Your inner critic tells you, aha, this is proof. This is proof that you do not really want it. This is proof that you're self destructive. This is proof that some part of you is fundamentally broken and refuses to let you have the things you actually want. But here is what I want you to consider instead. Self sabotage is almost never random, it is almost never meaningless. Instead, it is almost always a protection mechanism. What do I mean by that? Well, think about what happens when you're making real progress. When you're several weeks into a new approach with your health journey and things are working and you can feel yourself changing. And then something happens. You derail yourself, you go off the rails in a way that seems completely at odds with how you committed you felt. Why does this happen? Well, I'll tell you my own perspective on it. I think it happens because change, real lasting change, is frightening, even when it's change that we genuinely want. Because change means becoming a different version of yourself. And that new version is unknown, unfamiliar. And part of your brain, the part that is wired for safety and familiarity, resists the unknown. Even when the known is uncomfortable, even when the known is not serving you, even when the known is painful, the known is at least predictable. So I think that self sabotage is often your nervous system saying, this is just too much change too fast. This feels unsafe. Let's go back to what we know. And that's what I think. And that is the reason why I think self sabotaging behavior doesn't deserve punishment, it deserves compassion. Not because it's helpful, it's clearly not, and I'm not going to pretend it is, but because understanding why self-sabotaging behavior happens is the only thing that actually breaks the pattern. Punishing yourself for self-sabotage doesn't address the underlying fear that caused it. All it does, it just adds shame on top of the fear. And shame and fear together are an extraordinarily powerful recipe for staying exactly where you are. I know this firsthand. Maybe you do too. So, what do you do instead? What is the better approach? Well, my suggestion is to get curious and ask, what was I afraid of? What was the change that felt unsafe? What was my nervous system trying to protect me from? And then you address that fear with gentleness rather than aggression. And I don't want you to think that this is just a soft approach, a gentle approach that doesn't ultimately produce results, because I would argue that this is the only approach that actually works long term. Now, I want to take a moment here because I think this is genuinely important. The science of self compassion. It's not just feel good advice, it's not toxic positivity, it's genuine self compassion. And I want to make it clear because everything I'm saying today is not just feel good inspiration, it's not just some nice sounding advice. It is absolutely backed by research that is robust and consistent. The science of self compassion and the leading researcher in this field has done decades of rigorous work on this, shows something that I think is genuinely counterintuitive for many of us. The science shows that people who practice self compassion are not less motivated, they are more motivated. Does that surprise you? Because it certainly surprised me when I first started digging into the research. People who practice self compassion are not less likely to make healthy choices, they are often more likely to. They are not less likely to persist through difficulty, they are often more likely to. Why? Why is that? Well, the research suggests that self compassion reduces the fear of failure. That fear of failure, which is so critical for so many of us when it holds us back. And when you know that a setback will be met with kindness rather than cruelty, the setback becomes less catastrophic. You can recover from it faster. You can learn from it more effectively. You can get back on track without the enormous emotional weight of the shame spiral dragging you under first. So think about in your own life. Think about what happens when the inner critic descends after a setback. You feel terrible. Many of us do. You lose motivation. You often engage in what the researchers would call the what the hell effect. And yes, that is a real term. They call it the what the hell effect. What does that look like in your life? What does that look like in my life? Well, having already broken the rule, you decide that you might as well break the whole thing completely and completely go off the program. What the hell? So what does that mean? Have the whole pizza, not just the slice. Have the whole bottle, not just the glass, because the damage is done and the punishment will be the same whether you went a little off track or completely off track. Does any of this sound familiar? I know it certainly did for me for decades, but instead, when you meet a setback with self compassion, When your internal response is, okay, that happened. I understand why. What do I need right now? And what would help me get back on track? If you take that approach, you are far less likely to spiral into the what the hell effect. Instead, you return to your own path more quickly and with less damage. And that's the thing that's so surprising with the research. And yet, when you really think about it, it makes perfect sense. Self compassion is not the opposite of ambition, it is the foundation of sustainable ambition. Self compassion is what allows you to keep going when things are hard without the emotional cost of the punishment making the hard things unbearable. And I want to address something directly because I think there is a misconception that runs through a lot of these conversations. And it's certainly a misconception that I held for years that kept me away from self acceptance for years. Maybe it's something that you struggle with too. Here's the thing: self acceptance, true self acceptance, is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is not saying, I am fine as I am and I do not want to change. Self acceptance is not the same thing as accepting that nothing will change. It is accepting that you have value exactly as you are right now, regardless of your size, regardless of your rate, regardless of your current health status, regardless of anything. Self acceptance is accepting that your worth as a human being is not contingent on your dress size or the number on a scale or your looks. You have value because you are human. And let me draw a distinction that I think is genuinely clarifying because there is a difference between accepting yourself as you are and being satisfied with everything in your life. There's a difference, and both can coexist. I accept myself completely. Well, at least I'm trying to. Most days, but it took me decades to get here. But also, in addition to accepting myself completely, I also have enormous ambition for my health, my life, and my future. And those two things are not in conflict, even though I spent years thinking that they were. Actually, they're complementary because, in fact, the self acceptance is what makes ambition sustainable. And that's the thing that so few people truly appreciate. When you accept your inherent value, when you believe that you deserve good things not because you earned them by reaching a goal, but because you are a human being and human beings deserve good things, then your health goals change. They stop being about proving your worth and start being about expressing it. You stop exercising to punish your body for not being the size you want. And instead, you start moving because you love your body and you want it to feel strong, capable, and alive. Do you see the difference there? Because that is just so critical. You stop restricting food as a form of penance, and instead, you start nourishing yourself because you deserve to feel well, energized, and healthy. You stop chasing a number on a scale as a measure of your value and instead start building the body and the life that allows you to feel and live the way you actually want to feel and live. Does that feel different? It should because it is completely different at the root level. One approach comes from punishment and from hate. The other comes from love. And love, I promise you, is so much more powerful than punishment will ever be. And I want to get a little personal here. I don't want to just focus on the science in this episode or the theory. I want to tell you about when things started to change for me. And I want to be honest here. For me, there was no single aha moment that ultimately launched my health transformation. There was no one day that I woke up and decided to magically love myself and everything shifted. That's not how it worked for me. And I don't think that's how real life works. Instead, what it was is a series of moments accumulated over time. It was the moment I looked at myself in a photograph and I realized that the exhaustion I saw on my face was not the exhaustion of not trying hard enough. It was the exhaustion of trying in the wrong way for far too long. It was a conversation I had with a woman I deeply admired, someone who was a few years older than me, who'd built a remarkable life, and who just moved through the world with a particular kind of ease that I'd never felt. And I thought, oh, I want that. Not a specific body, but that. The ease, the confidence, the relationship and confidence that she had with herself. If I'm honest, it was also a health scare that made me sit with some very honest questions about what I actually wanted the next 20 years of my life to look like. Not just how I wanted to look, but actually how I wanted to live, what I wanted to be able to do, who I wanted to be. And gradually, through those accumulated moments, not through one dramatic turning point, the question for me shifted. It shifted from how do I punish myself into the body I want to what would it look like to truly take care of myself? Do you see the difference? It shifted from what do I need to eliminate to what do I need to add? It shifted from what is wrong with me to what does my body need actually right now from me? And that's the thing. When I started asking those different questions, started getting different answers. And when I started getting different answers, I started making different choices. Not perfectly, not immediately, but consistently over time in a direction that actually led somewhere. And over time, I lost over 100 pounds, not through more punishment, through less. Not through more restriction, through more nourishment. Not through hating myself into a different body, but through deciding slowly, imperfectly, repeatedly that I was worth taking care of. And I want to make this practical before we close today because I think the most powerful thing I can give you is not just the concept, but the specific language, the actual words that shift things. So let me take some of the most common self punishing thoughts I hear from women on their health journeys. Thoughts I used to have myself. And I want to offer you a reframe, not a toxic positivity spin, but instead a genuinely different, genuinely kinder, genuinely more productive way of relating to the same experience. So, instead of saying or thinking, I have no willpower, what if you said, I'm still learning what works for my specific body and my real life, and I'm getting closer? How does that sound? Instead of, I ruined everything by eating the thing, what if you said, one meal is one meal, one craving's one craving, it's not a verdict on my character or my journey. I return to my standards with the next meal. That sounds so different, doesn't it? Instead of saying or thinking, I always self sabotage, I always fail. What if you said something in me was afraid or exhausted or overwhelmed? That is worth getting curious about, not just punishing. It's such a different approach, isn't it? Instead of saying, I should have not had that craving or given into it, what if you said, my body is signaling something? Let me understand what it was signaling rather than hating myself for receiving the signal. Instead of thinking, I am never going to change. Oh, this is a big one. It's one that so many of us think for far too long. Instead of thinking, I am never going to change, what if you thought, I am changing slowly, imperfectly, in the way that real change actually happens? Maybe not on the timeline I wanted, but on the timeline that my body and my life need. And do you feel the difference in those shifts? Do you feel it? I really want you to feel that difference because it's not just cosmetic, it's not just nicer words, it's not just semantics. It is a completely different relationship with yourself. And that relationship, the one you have with yourself, that is the foundation on which everything else is built. And I want to close today with something I want you to actually feel, not just hear, feel. I want you to take a breath, and if it's safe to do so, if you're not driving or walking, I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. If you can't close your eyes safely, that's okay. Just listen along to this as well. Now, I want you to picture yourself 1 year from now. Not a specific number on a scale, not a specific size of clothing. I want you to picture how you feel. Imagine waking up with energy you have not had in years. Imagine moving through your day with a sense of ease and capability in your body. Imagine looking in the mirror and feeling something that is not criticism, something that is, if not love yet, is at least peace, at least a quiet acknowledgement that this body is yours and it has carried you through everything and it deserves to be cared for. Imagine the relationship you have with food, not one of fear and restriction and guilt and compensation, one of genuine nourishment, of choosing things because they make you feel well rather than avoiding things because you are afraid of them. Imagine the inner voice, not the critic, a different voice, one that sounds like the voice you would use with someone you love, that notices when you're tired and says when you need rest, not more punishment. That notices when you have done well and says, good, well done. You did that. That is yours. Now, ask yourself honestly, did you get there through punishment, through more harshness, more restriction, more cruel self talk? Or did you get there because at some point, maybe today, you decided that you were worth being cared for, that the life you want to live deserves to be built from love rather than hate, that your body is not your enemy to be conquered, but your home to be tended. That is where this leads, not to perfection, but to peace, to a sustainable, joyful, genuinely healthy life that you can actually maintain because it is rooted in something real and something yours. And I know from having lived it that it is possible. It's not easy, it's not quick, not linear, but possible. For you, exactly as you are right now. Not the version of you that reaches the goal, this version right now, today. It's possible. Now open your eyes. Now, let me bring this all together. I hope you found that exercise really powerful. And here's the thing, for years, I punished myself in the pursuit of health. Maybe you have too. And for years, I got the same results. the short term progress, the long term collapse, and an ever deepening belief that I was someone who just could not do this. But here's what I finally understood. And here is what I hope that I can share with you today. Punishment does not build, it breaks down. And you cannot build a healthy life from broken pieces of yourself. Self acceptance is not giving up. Instead, self acceptance is the only genuine foundation for lasting change. Because when you accept your inherent value, when you believe you deserve good things, not because you've earned them by being thin enough or disciplined enough, but because you are a human being, then everything shifts. And your cravings become signals to understand rather than evidence to punish yourself for. Your self sabotage becomes information about what you're afraid of rather than proof that you're fundamentally flawed. Your setbacks become part of the journey rather than the verdict on your character. And the inner voice, that cruel, relentless critic that has been with so many of us for decades, that starts to gradually quieten. Not all at once, not perfectly, but bit by bit, as you practice meeting yourself with the same kindness that you would offer someone you love, it gets quieter. And something else, something warmer, something more patient, something that actually serves you, that begins to take its place. So please hear me when I say this. You do not need to hate yourself into health. You never did. You only need to love yourself there. Now, before I let you go, a few things from the heart. If cravings are something you struggle with, if that particular source of shame is one that resonates with you as it does for so many of us, I have two things. First, go and listen to the full dedicated cravings episode. Link is in the show notes. We go deep on what all the cravings actually are, their sources, and the real practical strategies for each one. Because understanding your cravings, truly understanding them, is one of the most liberating things you can do in your health journey. And second, I'm building something specifically to help women manage cravings in real time. A dedicated tool for the moment when the craving is overwhelming and the shame spiral is about to begin. Something I'm genuinely proud of that I believe will be useful for this community. If you want to be amongst the first to hear about it when it launches, join the waitlist. The link is in the show notes. It takes under 30 seconds. I'd love for you to have it when it's ready. And if today's episode moved something in you, if something I said landed in a way that felt important, please share it with one woman in your life who you know is being cruel to herself in the name of health. Just forward it. Thought of you. That is enough. You might give her something that she's needed for a long time. A reminder that love and self-compassion is the only way forward. A review on Apple Podcasts helps more women find this community. Under 2 minutes, it's truly appreciated. And everything I mentioned in the episode today, my free meditation, the nutrition guide, cravings episode, waitlist, coaching details, it's all in the show notes below. Take care of yourself because you, exactly as you are right now, deserve it. And thank you for joining me for today's episode. If you want more real, honest guidance on losing weight and transforming your health sustainably in midlife, you're in the right place. Subscribe here and get my strategies, mindset shifts, and the tools that actually work for women 40 and above. No BS, no quick fixes, just real transformation. Don't forget you deserve to feel good in your body and life. I believe in you and I'm cheering you on every step of the way. Have an amazing day. For the obligatory legal disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, nutritionist, therapist, medical professional, or similar. All information shared on this podcast is purely for informational purposes and does not constitute medical advice. It is entirely your personal choice and responsibility as to what information you use. Please consult your own medical professional for any medical advice.